The Noaa Central Library seminar program is hosting this seminar today. The Central Library's seminar program provides an educational forum for the presentation of ideas, research updates, and news in support of Noaa's mission. I'm Katie. I will be your librarian host today. Please note this presentation is being recorded and your name, email, and questions will be shared with the presenters after the fact. As an attendee, you are muted, so please place all questions in the question panel, and we will be getting to a select few of them at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical issues, such as no audio or visuals, please try logging off and back on, as that solves most issues. If you are still running into an issue, please use the chat panel to reach out, and I will try and work with you to resolve that. With that, I will turn it over to Fiona Horsfall, who will kick off our seminar today.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is our June 23rd Fireside Chat, and we're building upon the Fireside Chat on transition plans that we held this past March. The Fireside Chat series on transitions will continue with a discussion on research to commercialization. The panelists will discuss what R2c is, research to commercialization, and provide information on how to get involved with transitioning R&D for the for-profit sector. These fireside chats on transitions are designed to enable participants to come away with a broader understanding of R&D transition at Noaa. So today's moderator will be Kelly Wright. Kelly is the director of Noaa's Technology Partnerships Office, or TPO. TPO manages both the Technology Transfer Program and the Small Business Innovation Research Program, or as you probably know, the SBR program. And TPO is housed within ORTA, Office of Research, Transition and Application, which is within OAR. However, both of TPO's programs are Noaa-wide. So Kelly, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this fireside chat to discuss research to commercialization, or R2c. We have a great panel compiled today that I have the pleasure of introducing. So first we have Derek Parks. Derek is the Deputy Director of the Technology Partnerships Office, give a wave, Derek, and formerly the Noaa Technology Transfer Program Manager. Next we have Wayne Mackenzie. Wayne is the new Noaa Technology Transfer Program Manager within the Technology Partnerships Office, or TPO. Next we have Chris Meinig, who is the Director of Engineering at OAR's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, or PMEL. Next we have Diane Kapareiko. Am I pronouncing that right? Okay, thank you, Diane. Diane is a microbiologist at Milford Laboratory under the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. Finally, Crane Johnson is here with us, and Crane is a hydrologist with the National Weather Service's Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. So we have a really fantastic panel comprised of folks that have a lot of experience working in commercial transitions with the private sector, and so I'm really looking forward to what they have to say and sharing with all of you their personal experiences about technology transfer and commercialization transition. So, as Fiona mentioned, I am the director of the Technology Partnerships Office, and my office manages both the Technology Transfer Program and the SBIR program for Noaa. However, today what we're going to specifically be talking about is the Technology Transfer Program and all of the components within the Technology Transfer Program. So what is a Technology Transfer Program? Here within Noaa and all federal agencies, it's basically designed to leverage the research capabilities of Noaa scientists and engineers within the commercial development potential of the private sector. So it encourages not only commercialization, but the adoption and use of Noaa research and engineering products through partnerships, and is oriented toward really finding potential users of Noaa's technology. And that's what TPO is here for, to help you find those users as well. So this increases the return on taxpayer investment in Noaa and enhances US competitiveness. So even though this fireside chat is titled R2c Fireside Chat, the full range of technology transfer includes that adoption and use of Noaa's research products as well as that strict definition of commercialization. So we're talking about all of those different things. So the commercialization word is a little misleading when we're talking about really transferring technologies for also adoption and use. So before I do provide kind of a brief basic description of what research to commercialization is, and then get into our discussion, I do want to point out that this discussion is not related to transitions or transition planning between line offices. So we're not going to talk about this. This is really focused on transitioning technologies outside of Noaa, so not between line offices. So then what is research to commercialization or technology commercialization? So in short, it is the process of transitioning technologies from the federal lab or research lab to the marketplace, or as I mentioned, these other uses or adoption of technologies or use of technologies. And part of NOAA's public service mission is to ensure that the results of its research are made available for public use and benefit. This is accomplished in many ways that everybody has been working with through education, publishing results of research, and ensuring that inventions are developed into useful products and or services for the benefit of the public. And this is where TPO comes in to help with that transition to useful products and services that would benefit the public. So since the federal government is not really in the business of manufacturing and selling new products or services, we do look to partner with industry instead to commercialize these inventions. And so, you know, what we're looking at here is again, we're looking at inventions, what has been developed within the course of business within NOAA's federal labs or through partnerships. And so federal funded R&D has historically led to a lot of dramatic economic growth, and there is significant potential to increase the public's return on investment in terms of innovation, job creation, societal impact, competitiveness, and economic prosperity while advancing NOAA's mission. So with that and that basic description of R2c and the components within it, I want to go ahead and get started on our panel discussion. Participants can put questions in the box as was mentioned earlier. We will try to address those at the end of our presentation, of our discussion. We're going to probably get to at least a couple of them. And if not, we will compile that information and try to reach out to those who ask those questions after this presentation is over. So with that, I want to really open it up to the panel because they have all of the great information you're really wanting to hear. So I'm going to direct the first question to Derek, and then maybe Chris and Wayne can provide input as well. So Derek, can you talk a little bit about the value of working with a private company?
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I'll provide kind of the high-level context, and really this whole presentation can be boiled down to what is the value of working with private sector companies in one way or another. So you'll hear from a number of panelists about what their experiences are and how it could benefit you as a scientist and engineer within NOAA. So from the high-level perspective, what we're trying to do, we see the benefit of working with the private sector, specifically in the research to commercialization realm, is that we can get technologies that you've developed for your particular lab or your particular application, whatever that may be, we can get those out to a larger user group and provide additional benefit as a result. So maybe you developed something that's fairly specific for whatever application you were trying to do, and maybe you don't think that it has a great deal of applicability outside of your lab or your particular research project, but maybe it does, and there might be a whole bunch of other people that could benefit from it. So that is one of our goals, and that's what our office is really here for, is to help get those technologies out to a larger user group. Additionally, we all know that transitions are a big metric that we're starting to track now within NOAA, specifically research to operations. But what we want to do with this particular fireside chat is to stress that there are other options. Not every technology is going to go into operations, as we all know. what we want to avoid is a situation where things become ingrained in research and development and become quasi-operational. We want things to transition some way or another. And so our office, again, can help to transition things outside of Noaa in one way or another. If it's not right for operations, then that's one opportunity. But even if it does go into operations, that doesn't mean that it's not excluded from also being sent out into the private sector in some way or another. There are lots of different pathways and opportunities that we want people to be aware of. And the last thing, obviously, the reason that our office exists is that these type of transitions do benefit the taxpayer, they benefit the economy, they promote job growth. So it's really a nice commerce-wide message that we're trying to promote, but it is something that's easy enough to do, and we're here to help with that. So that's the high level. Oh.
I am muted. I was muted. Okay, so thank you, Derek. Chris, can you provide a little bit more input onto that about the benefits of working with the private sector?
Yeah, I'll say, you know, the benefits are multifold, but each one is unique. What I found in my experience is you might have many different reasons to work with the private sector. Some of those that I can think of that have worked for us is it frees up internal capacity to do other things, right? So if now you can have access to capital and scaling and expertise in the private sector that can then serve both your internal needs and external customer needs, that's a bonus because it frees up research time to do other things. The other thing is you get access to some really, really good, talented people. In my experience, if you choose a good commercial partner, it'll improve your internal game. You'll learn a lot about how you design things for external users. You just improve your internal design process that you do that. And then you can rapidly scale. I mean, it's hard to have internal manufacturing within the government. If you get access to a company then that can scale and maybe advertise your standard that you're trying to set in whatever the data form or the instrumentation suite that you're trying to do, you'll get a broader reach to all that. The main thing to look at is really, each one is unique, and you need to really think about that and mutually come upon the reason of why you would want to transition it.
Yeah, agreed. Each thing under technology transfer is definitely unique. You need to look at, you know, who the partners will be there, you know, who's going to be working the project with you, and what is the benefit of that. So I absolutely agree, Chris. Wayne, do you want to provide any input?
Yeah, sure. I think the one thing to reiterate what Chris just mentioned, which is about you know, learning from the private sector too. I think it's a really good opportunity when we partner with the private sector to bring in expertise that we normally don't have, right? And that could be expertise not just in scaling and manufacturing and getting something to grow to a larger scale, but it's also knowledge that they can provide that perhaps we just don't have the knowledge base for. So I always like to think of partnerships as sort of a two-way street. You know, not only are we providing them a benefit, but there's also a benefit to us as well, and that we can gain some knowledge and some experience in things so we can do maybe next time in a new project, we can bring that expertise and maybe be a couple steps ahead, or perhaps you know, we'll learn something completely new that'll take research that's existing research in a totally different direction.
Great, thanks, Wayne. So Derek, following up on the benefit of working with private companies, so what are a couple of examples of the types of commercial transitions and those methods used? You know, how can people do this? What are the mechanisms to do that?
Well, the first thing I wanted to point out is that a research to commercialization or outside use transition is slightly different than what you would do on a research to operations for one primary reason. And that is that we're conveying property from one entity to an outside entity. So within Noaa, we can freely move our intellectual property back and forth without any problem. When we decide to give that intellectual property to an outside party to do something with it, we just have some basic requirements that we want to hit in terms of checking to make sure that we actually own it, which ironically is something that happens more frequently than you would imagine, that we actually do not own the technology that we've somehow developed. And then making sure that we give the right use the right mechanisms to actually convey that technology to the partner, the most appropriate mechanisms in that sense. So what is going to be the most beneficial to NOAA, to the taxpayer, to the project? All of these things should be considered when we're doing that transition. So it's not a one size fits all. So with that in mind, there are a number of different ways that we can actually transition something, all the way from the most formal, which is to actually file a patent application. And if we are awarded a patent on a technology, then we can license against that patent. So that's very restrictive, has the absolute most control for NOAA. We can determine who uses it for how long and under what circumstances, all the way to the other end, which would be open source licensing, or even just free to the public. It's something like a publication. When we do a publication, that's in the public domain, and there's really zero control that we have on that. So it spans the gamut. In the middle of those options, there's also the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, which is a unique tool that was originally developed to actually do collaborative R&D, and then the company would take the results of that collaborative R&D and have it for commercial benefit while we would be able to use it. The legislation is gray enough that we've expanded this tool to use for a lot of different purposes. So we can actually take a technology that we worked on exclusively and move it over to a private company using a CRADA. And that allows a little bit more interaction than just putting it out in a publication and saying, here, take it, without any kind of back and forth with our inventors and our folks. So really a wide range of opportunities. And we have some experience here on the panel of doing just about all of these things, which is great.
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on your statement of IP ownership and the question of, do we actually own what we developed? And I think that what folks need to realize, and I think a lot of us don't realize, is that Cooperative Institute employees, this is one example, Cooperative Institute employees are not NOAA employees. And so if there is something that is developed with NOAA personnel and Cooperative Institute personnel side by side, that doesn't mean that NOAA owns all of that technology. The portion that is developed by the Cooperative Institute employees is technically owned by the university, because it is there are regulations under Bayh-Dole Act that talk to that. So that's a whole nother intellectual property discussion that we can certainly have, but this is why it's important to really talk to our office, not really just at the end of we're looking to maybe commercialize this or transfer this to the private sector because we either didn't, put it into operations, or we're just looking for another use for it. But kind of at the beginning to determine, what are you going to use this for? Are you going to be using this for operations, this product or service that you're developing, and do you want it protected? Because if not, that portion that the Cooperative Institute employee developed or employees, they can utilize that or put that technology out there. So it's very important to understand those things. And when in doubt, come to our office and just ask us. We're here to help you and answer any questions that we can. I also wanted to quickly touch on CRADAs, the Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. And the other benefit of working, as Derek emphasized, is that you can work with a company to transition a technology outside, but we can also work with companies to, do mutually beneficial research and development, and the information coming out of that, the technology NOAA has the right to use, but then the company can take that technology and run with it and commercialize it. And they have kind of the advantage from working with NOAA to be able to go and do that instead of us just giving it away to everybody. The other thing is that information under a CRADA and the results are protected from Freedom of Information Act disclosure for 5 years. So just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that, but I wanted to see if anybody else, maybe specifically Chris, do you have any input related to the different types of commercialization?
Yeah, I think as I was reflecting, as Derek was saying, I think we've transitioned technology through every one of those pathways. And I think I'll emphasize the one thing is that early engagement, and get your invention disclosure form filed early. That puts a marker in. Practice good hygiene, which is keep a notebook with your documents listed so you can figure out who did what, whether it's the federal team, the CI team. Keep that. I've taken, photocopies with a dated notebook before to reference back to the invention disclosure form. So that starts very early. It's not arduous. It's really not that bad. Derek and Kelly are great people to work with. It all happens, really, really well. Don't think of this, if you're sitting on the fence of doing it, it's not an overwhelming process. And then the benefits are multifold. And then how you transition this, it's very little is about the actual idea. The actual patent idea is just a very small part of the whole process. It's really about the know-how. So these agreements then help you transition the know-how, whether it's visiting each other's laboratory or having a clear understanding of a shared vision. All these things are important of how you further move that along. But I would reemphasize early and often communications. If you're not sure, just fire off an email and ask the question. There's really no harm in that.
Yeah, and if you feel like asking us, you can always ask Chris. He knows it all. Does anybody else want to provide any input before I go on to the next question? We're good? Okay.
Can't hear you, Kelly.
Thank you very much. This time it was my fault, of course. So the next question I would like to go towards Diane and Chris. And so you both worked with the private sector on commercial transitions. As Chris said, he's pretty much used all of the methods to do that. So can you speak a little bit about how you've engaged with the private sector and a little bit specifically about how exactly you identified your partner?
Yeah, I mean, the closest analogy I can make is it's a little bit like you're starting off dating and eventually you get engaged and then there's some kind of marriage, because it really is all about the relationship. And in the early days, there's an awful lot of things you'll want to get clear, just like in dating. You'll want to have a clear vision of what this relationship is going to be like, make sure each is getting what they want out of this as you move along. I'll say I've had all of the above. I've had the private sector approach us for a potential match. We've had private sector come through TPO to ask. We've had an open licensing agreement to the patents where we've accepted applications that then we've reviewed through that process. But it's really going to be in the early days where you will make, if you're like the typical technologist, you just don't have a lot of time. You need to evaluate these things very carefully to make sure it's worth the investment. And just as a tip-off, this is just from my experience, so just a story. If in the early days of this, I'll call it the honeymoon phase, everything is awesome. It's never better than the honeymoon phase. It's never going to get back to that honeymoon phase again. If things are not good in the honeymoon phase, I seriously suggest taking a step back, get a higher viewpoint, and reevaluate this relationship to see if it's worth it or not. Some of the flags and tip-offs might be if there's a lot of lawyers involved. That is a clear tip-off in the early days that things might not be going the direction you want, because there's much more emphasis on that rather than on the creation and the shared vision. There's of course needs to be the proper amount of legal review and engagement. All that is wonderful, but the idea is to get those hurdles out of the way so you can free up your capacity in order to do the creative work. And then what I found is there's a certain relaxation once the CRADA is in place and we feel like, okay, we can exchange information freely. We can actually focus on what's important. But if people are nitpicking down through each little legal entity, just file that off in the back of your head that that's a flag that's going on. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that was a great analogy, Chris. Thanks. Diane, would you like to provide some input?
Absolutely. Chris, I can say for our experiences, we have not had a lot of legal issues, thank God. I think that would be really scary and not want to have to deal with that. As Kelly said, I work at the Milford Laboratory, and we've been researching and developing techniques for the aquaculture community for many, many years. We have a historic close connection to the aquaculture community. So we exchange ideas at our conferences. For example, we have the Milford Aquaculture Seminar that's been going on for more than 40 years now. NACE, National Shellfish Fisheries Association, World Aquaculture Association. When you present your data, your research at these conferences, invariably somebody contacts you and reaches out to you, such as Derek Parks. And I believe that's how we initially met, is at a conference. And you find out that people are super interested in what you're doing and are willing to collaborate. So same as Chris, we've had opportunities where people have reached out to us. And we also, given the fact that the Milford Lab knows the aquaculture community quite well, we have also reached out to various commercial shellfish hatcheries who are excited and willing to participate in our studies. And I do have to say that the expertise and knowledge of the NOAA TPO office was invaluable in getting us partnerships with the private sector, with hatcheries, as well as with a biotech firm to scale up and commercialize our bacterial probiotic strain OY15 that we've been working on, which improves survival of oyster larvae. So more recently, we have had opportunities to scale up our trials to commercial hatchery scale trials with some pretty influential shellfish hatcheries in the United States as well as in Ireland. And we have done all of these via CRADA or material transfer agreements. With help from Derek and the team at the NOAA TPO office. So we're very fortunate that people are excited about our work and are reaching out to us, but we can also reach out to them as well.
Thanks, Diane. And Derek, I don't know if you wanted to follow up with that, but I don't know if this is the case, but if you were at that conference and you saw the presentation and said, oh, that's really cool, I think we need to look and see if we can do something with that technology, because a lot of times what happens is that we find that folks, as Diane said, you present at a conference, you present your information, you present your research, and we may or may not catch that, right? So it's very important sometimes to get with us prior to disclosing things if we think there may be an invention or something that could be transitioned to the private sector for commercialization or other uses and adoption, because once you disclose that technology, the clock starts ticking. And I think, Derek, is it once you disclose you're done, or is it a year? You have a year after disclosure to file.
Yeah,
it
depends on the market that you're talking about. So in the United States, we can disclose a technology, and as long as you have the paperwork to back it up, you can still file for a patent on that technology within 1 year of the initial public disclosure. So a public disclosure is something on your website. It could be speaking to a person in sufficient amount of detail. It could be a publication. So all of those things are considered initial public disclosures, and they do start the clock ticking for when we could file a patent if we decided to. Outside of the United States, in the Patent Cooperation Treaty countries, for example, that initial public disclosure is the killing point. So really it is, for most tech transfer organizations, the methodology is get us the invention disclosure before you're going to publish in any way. We'll do a quick provisional patent application. Whether or not we decide to follow up on it is immaterial. We just want to get that initial stake in the ground so that if you decide that we want to protect this, we can go ahead and do it. But that's the challenge. And in Diane's case, we were at the aquaculture event, and I saw her poster. And was like, I need to find this Diane person. This looks interesting.
Couldn't go to that conference, but the poster was there, so yes.
Gotcha. And now I'd like to throw it over to Wayne.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention too in this conversation is, how to identify a partner. One option we can do too is, let's say you're not quite sure who you want to partner with, and so in our authority in using the Collaborative Research and Development Agreement, we can actually do a request for information. And so we can actually put out there what it is we're looking to do and have companies respond to that. And from there, we can work together to decide who is going to be the best partner for what it is you want to do. So just wanted to throw it out there. There is another option we have that we can do requests for informations to identify a partner as well.
Absolutely, and that's a good option if you're not really sure about who you would like to partner with, or there are several different groups that can, and we can do several credos on the same project that folks are working independently of each other, but working with you within your lab.
So Kelly, I have one other thing to throw in.
Yes, please go ahead.
People might be asking themselves as well, so what if I go and present my some basic research, but then somebody comes up to me after the conference and wants to know a lot more detail? What do I do in that case? The easiest way when you're looking to speak with somebody in some detail is you can do a non-disclosure agreement, and the Department of Commerce has a gold standard non-disclosure that you can sign right there at the lab level. It doesn't have to go through multiple levels of clearance. It's almost an immediate execution. So really highly recommended if you have any concerns about speaking to somebody about a technology.
Right. And I do want to mention as well that under a CRADA, you are not required to compete a CRADA or really send it out there and say, hey, who would like to maybe partner with us? You can choose who you would like to partner with. So if you already have something in mind, you can certainly do that. So there's no requirement for competition, but sometimes it is a good option to put out that RFI and see what you get back. So Chris, I did want to follow up with you on your experience in patenting and licensing of those patents that you worked on. So do you feel that there's a value in filing a patent and issuing licenses against that patent, or do you prefer really the CRADA route, but really focusing on the value, if there's value with the patent?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the answer is it depends. Right? We've done both, and I think we've done both for the right reasons. For the one that we've licensed the most is really on the DART system, so our tsunami observing system. And so that went pretty well. I'll say that actually writing up the patent documentation itself, that has to be a contracted process. So it's not Noaa lawyers writing up the patent. So just be aware that most of the time, for the lab directors out there, you will spend about $20,000 to write up that process. And there was some sharing, Derek, I don't remember if you guys covered that or if the lab covered that. There was some sharing of the resources there, but it can be a significant task. So be aware of that. And then the flip side is most of the time, you will get a firm that isn't necessarily the top of the field in patent law. You will get some junior lawyer that you will have to do a lot of hand-holding with to get the language right. So even though they're writing up the documentation, they're doing the due diligence and writing up the claims, just be aware of the time involved in that. It'll take some time. That being said, once you do have the property in hand, once you do have that, we all would like to think that perhaps there's multiple licensees, and in our oceanographic field, that's exceedingly rare. Right? Most of the time, what we'll find is there's value in having an exclusive license for two reasons. One, the company then has that exclusive property that's reviewable on an annual rate, but they also are investing a lot. You have to think of it from the company's perspective. Just because they are licensing the patent doesn't mean they aren't investing a lot of money. I mean, in some cases, it's been millions of dollars that they had to invest in order to stand up the manufacturing process, get the expertise, get the knowledge transfer, for all those things to happen. So please be aware of what it is on the company side and how you license this and what you roll into the agreement. On the nice side, the laboratory directors get money that comes back to them and it's also split with the inventors. So the sharing and the split of royalties is really encouraging, both for the laboratory director that then has discretionary over these non-appropriated funds to reinvest those in certain ways. Awesome for the lab director, awesome for the inventors, awesome for the whole team that comes together. So for licensing, it's gone really. It's pretty well. There's other times when we've not decided to file a patent and we've gone other directions for other reasons. But on those that we've chosen in the patent and licensing process, it's been straightforward with the investment up front. That's absolutely needed.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, it used to be that the lab did cover the patent application and maintenance fee costs. TPO is now covering those costs for all of Noaa for any patents filed. So we will provide the funding for the patent application and all maintenance fees. So it'll be, like you said, about maybe $20,000 for that per patent. So again, we need to look at really what is the benefit of patenting. Do we really need to protect this technology, or can we get it out a different way? So following up on that, as far as patents, Derek, what types of things can be patented? And if somebody wanted to do that, how would they go about that process to try to patent something or see if it is patentable?
So that is another discussion that could warrant an entire fireside chat on its own, or a half day even, because it does vary depending on the technology. And we're trying to come up in TPO with some kind of clear-cut ways that we can evaluate new technologies that come in, just to say, rough cut, yeah, this is worth looking at patenting. This is probably better for open source. This is something where we need to have a little bit more discussion. The number of technologies that we're dealing with, we don't have to have a full patent review board like most larger companies or agencies would have. But I think there are ways to go through that initial calculation with the inventor, with the lab director, just to see what the goals are for the project and how they want to use it, and we can make an educated decision on that. But at the higher level, generally when we're talking about patenting, we're talking about something that's tangible in a lot of cases. So it could be a sensor, it could be like the dart buoy, it could be a method or a process for doing something. Those are two really good examples. A large majority of the work that we're doing right now within Noaa is related to software, so that falls under a different law. And I don't want to say that exclusively, because you can actually patent a method that's based on software, but not the software, not the code itself. So the code itself is subject to copyright law, and there's a whole lot of complexity around that. That's another fireside chat entirely as well. Just due to the inability for the federal government to assert copyright, that just throws a whole layer of complexity into it. So when you're thinking about patenting, think about the tools and the equipment that you come up with, or as in the case of what Diane has come up with, it's more of a process really than the actual. I don't even know if I want to say that. I'm probably getting in over my head here, because I'm talking about starting to veer into the science, and I'm just going to start to sound stupid. So let's just say it varies.
And I'm looking at the time, and so I want to go through these. I want to make sure we get to all of our questions. This is indeed going quickly, and I think that we could certainly focus an entire fireside chat on just CRADAs or just patents or different issues. So we may want to look into that in the future. So moving forward, I do want to focus on CRADAs, and Derek has mentioned that a CRADA is really a wonderful tool to use to be able to work with others for toward mutually beneficial projects while not having to provide federal funding. So we are not permitted to provide federal funding under a CRADA, and yes, people will work with us without us paying them. So that's the good part of a CRADA. So I want to talk about how you use a CRADA to transition to technology. And so Derek, I just want you to briefly talk about how you use a CRADA to do that, which you kind of already touched on, but then throw it to Crane and Chris to talk about your personal experiences with utilizing CRADAs.
Yeah, I did really cover the majority of it, which is just the CRADA is an agreement that allows us to give our time and convey our intellectual property to an outside party. And we can do that in exchange for their funding. They can pay us for this, for our time and for our intellectual property under a CRADA, or we can do it in kind. And so I just wanted to throw over to Crane and let him talk about how we were able to transition his technology to an outside company with a CRADA.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Thanks, Derek. I think the story is similar to Diane's. We developed something in our field office. We're not a development lab, we're a weather service sort of operational office. Shared it via a few NOAA conferences. I think Derek and TPO identified it and contacted us and really helped us fill a need we had, and that's we don't manufacture the equipment. We had been building them in-house and really needed external. We wanted to just be able to sort of open up a catalog or call somebody up and order these. And so Derek connected us through, I think, advertising on the TPO website with a commercial vendor that was, I think, I echo what Chris discussed. I was definitely worried about investing significant time with a partner and then it not panning out. We got lucky, and then Derek's office found a great partner that then we sort of initiated the CRADA process. It was pretty straightforward from our office's perspective. We were interested in putting in the extra time. We had gotten inquiries within NOAA and external to NOAA. How do I get this equipment? How do I get this new river sensor technology? And we knew that it's not really we're not there to build and sell these or even build these for other NOAA offices. So we started the CRADA process, shared ideas through meetings, used NOAA's VLab tools to share code, to keep the code sort of in the NOAA space as the vendor improved it. We shared sort of ideas we had for improvements that we hadn't tackled that they took care of. And I think through the process, after maybe 18 months, it turned out we could just go and buy these. And so, what we've developed in-house, we just turn around now and just purchase these direct. And we still have a relationship with the CRADA commercial partner and get occasional questions. I think we've helped even recently with sort of data integration on the NOAA side. So we continue to sort of help them improve the product that benefits the NOAA partners that have bought it in other offices.
That's a great example. Chris, did you want to add anything?
I think in the interest of time, I'm glad to talk about, we've done probably 15 CRADAs. In the interest of time, I'd love to hear from some of the attendees about their specific questions, but of course, I'm glad to talk about any of it.
Perfect. I would like to, I'd like to first go to Wayne prior to going to the participant questions, because I want Wayne to talk about R2c Planning. And so the first Fireside Chat, as Fiona had mentioned, was about transition plans, and most people think about this in relation to R2o, so research to operations. But how do you then incorporate R2c, the commercialization aspect, into a project or a transition plan? And especially like with NOAA being an operational agency, the bigger question is, why do we consider R2c, and then how do we incorporate that into our planning?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I know, myself, I was previously in NESDIS, and our focus always was, weather service, and we never really, not that we didn't think about private sector, but our focus was the weather service. And so I think, if when developing a project plan, being able to think about, are there private sector companies perhaps we may want to partner with? Maybe there's expertise they can provide. Maybe we want to partner with them to give us another opportunity to share this knowledge and information during the project. One of NOAA's mission is all about sharing knowledge and information, and so it could be an opportunity to do that early in the project. And I really think, the earlier we think about these things, the easier it will be for us to react to that, right? Everything that everyone's talked about here today. So, do we want to patent this information? Do we want to bring in a private partner through a CRADA and try to mature the project and the research levels through that process? Do we want to potentially open source everything? Having an idea of how we want to do that earlier, I think, is really important. And so I would encourage everybody, if you're early stages of developing a project plan and you have questions or you want to brainstorm ideas, and we're always here to help with that. And so please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to try to facilitate that for you.
Right, absolutely. And as we mentioned before, you can incorporate R2c into your planning even if you are planning for R2o. We could see, is there a component within your plan for R2o that might be able to transition to the private sector as well? In addition, I think somebody mentioned as well, looking at if something does not transition, because there's a lot of things that we work on within Noaa that don't actually transition to operations. And then if you come to TPO, we can work with you to try to see if we can find some partners for you, or for somebody that could pick it up on the outside and kind of run with that, technology. So it's not wasted research. Like I heard somebody mention during the first Fireside chat, if it's not transitioning, is it just wasted research? Is it just wasted work? And it's not. So, please contact us and we can try to help with that. I have asked Francis, I think I sent a note to him to say, okay, here's a question. Here's the first participant question. The question is, are there any specific R2c goals within Noaa? And if so, what are they? Derek, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll jump on that really quickly. We, on behalf of Noaa, our office is required to report annually, essentially on the number of CRADAs that we execute and the number of patents and licenses that we have. So the metrics are very high level right now that we represent or report on back to the federal government. That's probably going to change, where the focus is more towards impact, just like it is for publications. What's the impact and what's the value of the technology transfer that we're making? So I expect to see those refined in the future.
Okay, Derek, can you see question number 2? From Francis. It is way tiny for me and I'm having a hard time reading it.
Do you consider a transfer of knowledge from Noaa to the private sector as a research to commercialization transition? Answer is yes. For example, we have some new social science knowledge that private sector companies are interested in implementing to improve their weather communication products. If so, how can we better market some of our relevant knowledge to be transitioned to the private sector? Find mutual benefits. That is a fantastic question. I'm glad that you set us up that way. We're currently redesigning the TPO website to try to do a better job of that specifically. We get inquiries from industry in for Noaa, and we get inquiries, obviously technologies that we find out about within Noaa. We want to do a better job of actually creating that sort of marketplace of ideas. If nothing else, I know how hard it is to do kind of these matchmaking sites. To go back to Chris's analogy of the dating thing, we're not going to be the Tinder of Noaa as cool as it might be. We just don't have the people and the technology to be able to do that. But what we can do is put the Noaa technology out in a single place and do a good job of amplifying that for you. The problem is we just need to know about it. So as much as you can tell us, we will do as good a job as we possibly can in getting that knowledge out to the people that it would be of interest to. Can you see the next one, Kelly? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, would anybody else like to provide a response? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would also like to add to that question in the sense of a strong yes, because we can, use our, like, for example, a CRADA authority to have us set up a partnership with those companies and multiple companies even. We don't have to pick one. If there's multiple companies that are interested, we could set up CRADAs with all of those. And it gives us a nice avenue to be able to work with them. And also, as I think it was Kelly or maybe Derek mentioned a little bit earlier, when we set up a CRADA, anything that's discussed during that CRADA or anything that's developed through the CRADA is not subject to FOIA. So that way we can protect some of the business's interests as well. So just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. Would anybody else like that?
Okay, whenever you're done, I'm going to go to question 3 because Wayne just hit on question 3. But if anybody else wants to comment on question 2, go for it.
Go ahead, Derek. I appreciate you taking it because I can't see such small things.
Yeah, so question 3 really follows on what Wayne was saying. When intellectual property is transitioned to industry via a CRADA, does industry then patent or secure the IP to manufacture and commercially market the products? The CRADA, as Wayne was saying, gives you that 5-year period of essentially what's called almost it's a trade secret in that respect, which we are not normally able to do in the federal government. But with the CRADA, we have that 5-year protection period where we are not obligated to talk about our company. So theoretically, we transition something, the technology gets conveyed to them, and then there's a period of additional development. That period of additional development is where new intellectual property is created. They can file a patent on that new intellectual property. And they could theoretically file on the stuff that we gave them before, so long as it hasn't been made public before by Noaa. So again, it's a little bit complicated, the discussion, but the CRADA does give the company some opportunity to generate and claim intellectual property.
And this is one of those instances, as Chris noted previously, no two things are identical. So every technology transfer mechanism we use, every CRADA, even though it's the same process, every CRADA is totally different because of the components being put into it. And so we work very closely with OGC to determine the intellectual property rights and all of the issues under each CRADA, because they are so totally different, each and every one of them.
Yeah, and I'll just add that.
I'll make a quick comment. I mean, we've with our CRADA partner, we've had those discussions, and I think, you know, what they decided to do sort of meets their business need, and for them it was just go fast, get it out there, market the product, and try to grab some of the sort of market share.
Yeah, just add, just keep the you know, what Derek mentioned, keep the CRADA information as business proprietary and treat it as such. You know, don't put those out in news releases, or be very careful about which pictures they are willing to share and what they're willing to do, because the essence of any partnership is trust, and you have to get that mutual trust in order to each move forward together.
Yeah, and when you're working on a project, Chris is absolutely right. When you're working on a project like this, it's very important that you talk to your partner, your CRADA partner, about what they're okay with you releasing and what they are not. So, for example, releasing, hey, Noaa just signed this CRADA with X company. Sometimes they don't want to do that because they don't want their competitors to know that they're working on something with Noaa. So we have to respect that partnership. And but sometimes they would love for you to put this out because it gives them additional visibility as well. So it's very important to ask them. You need to ask them and make sure to protect their interests. So I can see the next question. So the next question says, can Diane, it's small, can Diane speak more about how her knowledge transferred to a patent? Did you do a patent?
No, we did not, and our intention is not to patent our probiotic strain. We want to keep it very cost-effective for the shellfish hatcheries to purchase, and we think in keeping it cost-effective, they will more likely use it, and it will be to their benefit. So no. Initially, in discussions with our lab director, our intent was not to patent it. That being said, once our probiotic is commercialized, we do have a biotech company in mind for that, which I do have to strongly advocate for discussion on everything. As Kelly, you have been saying, before you do anything, discuss with your partner. Open discussion is key to moving forward with the commercialization, and we've been very lucky with that. So once it gets to our biotech company partner, that's a question for Derek. I don't know if they would be wanting to patent it. We will not be. No.
So, yeah, that kind of goes to that distinction I was fumbling with in my head earlier, is that you have the OY15 probiotic that was discovered, developed by Noaa, that's past the point of being able to patent that. That's out in the public domain. So the actual probiotic itself is not patentable any longer. The method of actually turning that into a commercial product, so whether it would be a freeze-dried formulation or some other type of product that is easily integrated into the aquaculture process, that may be something that's patentable, and that they may want to patent because they want the exclusive right to be able to do that. So anybody can use OY15, but you have to have a license to be able to use it in this freeze-dried or whatever the formulation might be, you know.
Their processes for formulating it are their proprietary information. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so they may keep that as a trade secret rather than as a patentable thing.
We
Absolutely.
don't even.
So I wanted to, while we're waiting for more questions, I wanted to touch on one of the questions or something that Derek had raised regarding open source software. And so there has been it's a subject that's had a lot of discussion recently, not just with open source software, but also hardware. So Derek, you've been involved in the team discussing the NAO on software governance. Can you talk a little bit about how Noaa handles open source licensing and how it interacts and/or plays with commercialization in general?
Most definitely. So for those of you in the field that do not know, there is a new administrative order that is in draft form that's floating around, and that's all related to how to make software products public, and then what licenses we're able to use or not use for those particular things. It again gets very complicated because of the Bayh-Dole Act that Kelly was mentioning before, and the fact that most of our software products are almost always co-developed with some sort of a partner. It's very rare that we have federal scientists working alone on these projects. So the ownership rights get kind of complicated. We want to lay everything out in a single administrative order to let people know what the process is to go through to get software quickly out the door. That's the goal. And do it in the right way instead of throwing on a license that we may not legally be able to enforce. So that's what's happening in a lot of cases. We take standard examples from the internet and things that seem to make sense, but the law is not in support of us when it comes to actually enforcing those things in many cases. So on the hardware side, Chris's group is pushing us to come up with some new guidelines on how to actually open source hardware. This was a brand new thing for me, and so I'm kind of excited about this, but we're trying to get the legal basis in place to know, again, do we have the right to actually put this type of a license on our hardware and put it out? And if that's what the real key point that we're just trying to lay down at this juncture. So it's really new and exciting.
Thank you, Derek. And it looks like we're actually at time. This went much faster than I thought it would. So I do want to thank everybody again for their participation in this panel. And again, thanks so much to the panel for providing such great information. And thanks to all of the participants for their questions. And again, those that we didn't get a chance to answer, we will follow up. We'll get those questions and be able to follow up. So if you have any questions related to R2c, technology transfer mechanisms, or partnering with the private sector, please feel free to contact any of us at the Technology Partnerships Office, but I would say specifically to contact Wayne Mackenzie, who again is our new Noaa Technology Transfer Program Manager. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to all of the panel members again.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you all for
participating. Library as well, and to Katie for helping
Oh yes,
us out.
thank the library. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, we did record this and it will be up on the library's YouTube channel if you would like to share it with your colleagues. I hope everyone has a safe and healthy rest of their Wednesday. Thank you all.
Great, thanks so much, you too. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.